All right, let's talk about something that's incredibly difficult but so important: addiction. We're going to come at it from a totally different angle today, one that comes from the work of Dr. Gabor Maté. And his time on the front lines has led to a really radical and, a deeply compassionate new way of seeing things.
This quote right here, it comes directly from Dr. Maté's time working in Vancouver's downtown Eastside, which is pretty much ground zero for the addiction crisis. So what he's talking about isn't some abstract theory from a book. No, it was forged by working with thousands of people on this exact battleground. And that harsh reality, well, it really sets the stage for everything we're about to unpack.
Okay, so before we can really get into the new idea, we've got to understand the old one. The story that most of us, have been told our whole lives about what addiction actually is. Yeah, this is a standard playbook, right? Society usually sees addiction as some kind of personal failing, a lack of willpower, a flaw in your character. And even when the medical world gets involved, it often just slaps on a label like inherited brain disease. But what if every single one of these labels is completely missing the point?
This right here, this is where everything flips. Dr. Mattei suggests something radical. Stop looking at the addictive behavior. Just stop, and instead, start looking at the pain that's driving it.
The difference here is it's everything. On the left, you've got blame and you've got biology. But on the right, you have a human response to suffering. This one little shift completely reframes addiction. It's not the main problem anymore. It's a person's desperate attempt to solve a problem, which is unbearable emotional pain. And that's the core idea. The substance, the gambling, the shopping, whatever the behavior is, it has a purpose. It's not the source of the problem, it's a frantic attempt at a solution. It gives someone a fleeting moment of relief from a pain that otherwise feels absolutely constant and totally inescapable. Okay, so if addiction is really a response to pain, then the next question is pretty obvious, right? Where does all that pain come from? Well, the answer overwhelmingly is trauma.
Just look at this number. It's absolutely staggering. Over 12 years working in the downtown Eastside, Dr. Maté found that every single woman he treated for a severe addiction had been sexually abused when they were a child. Every single one. And every single man had also experienced some kind of major trauma. This is not a coincidence. There's no way. It's a direct, undeniable link.
And this is how that trauma takes root and grows. See, it's not just a bad memory. It actually changes a person from the inside out. First, it creates this deep, burrowing sense of shame. From that shame comes this immense emotional pain. And now we actually have the science to prove that early trauma literally rewires a child's developing brain. It physically shapes the circuits for reward and stress, making that person more vulnerable to addiction down the line. And this is just the heartbreaking logic of being a kid. A child can't really understand that the adults they rely on might be broken or harmful. So when they get hurt or they're neglected, their brain comes to the only conclusion it can. It has to be my fault. I must be worthless. I'm unlovable. And that shame, it becomes a core piece of who they think they are. So, as if that original trauma wasn't devastating enough, the way our society responds to addiction, well, it often just makes everything so much worse. We actually end up punishing people for being in pain. And what that does is create this horrible, vicious cycle. So a person who is traumatized tries to soothe their pain, and what's our response? We criminalize them, we throw them in jail, we shame them. All this does is pile more trauma right on top of that original wound, which of course just deepens their need for the very escape the addiction was providing in the first place. It's a trap. And this just shows the incredible hypocrisy of our whole approach. Think about it. We punish traumatized people for using something like heroin to numb their pain, but our society is totally fine with someone legally drinking themselves to death with alcohol or smoking until they get lung cancer. The judgment isn't really about self-harm. It's about which drugs we've decided are culturally okay. And this problem, it goes right into the doctor's office. Dr. Maté actually argues that the medical profession is, for the most part, trauma-phobic. I mean, the average medical student, at least until very recently, never even heard the word trauma in all their training, let alone understood how deeply it affects both mental and physical health. So why is that? Well, it's because modern medicine often operates under an ideology that is just hyper-focused on biology and symptoms. If you can frame a problem as a brain disease, then the solution is a pill.
The whole system trains doctors to manage behaviors, not to ask about the emotional pain or the personal history that's driving those behaviors. They don't have the training or even the time for that. Okay, so if judging people doesn't work and punishing them just makes things worse, what is the alternative? Well, it all starts by changing the most basic question that we ask.
This is the one we always ask, right? Why the addiction? But it only focuses on the behavior. It invites judgment, and it sends us looking for a simple fix for just the symptom. It's a question that keeps us stuck.
But this question changes everything. Why the pain? This shifts our focus from the what to the why. It makes us look past the behavior to the actual human being and their life story. It makes us ask, what happened to you that left you in so much pain? And what is this addiction actually doing for you?
And when you start asking that question, you get to a totally different idea of what recovery looks like. It's not about some expert in a white coat curing a patient. No, healing is an internal journey. It's about creating the right conditions, safety, compassion, understanding, where a person can finally start to face and resolve the trauma they're carrying inside.
So let's just end with this really powerful idea. Maybe the most compassionate and useful way to look at addiction isn't as a disease or a moral choice, but as a survival strategy. It was someone's attempt, their best attempt, to solve the problem of unbearable pain when they had absolutely no other way to cope. And understanding that, that's not just a nice thought. It's the very first step toward real healing.